One of the world's greatest enduring mysteries is a mystery no more. For decades, the Bermuda Triangle has captured imaginations.
Miami, Bermuda Island, and San Juan in Puerto Rico. If you draw a line between these three places, you get the Bermuda Triangle. For decades, we have lost countless ships, aircraft, and massive vessels in this stretch of water. So the question is, what exactly keeps happening in these waters? In 2003, a routine expedition searching for centuries-old shipwrecks near the Bermuda Triangle stumbled upon something that didn't match anything ever seen. At first, the crew assumed it was an equipment malfunction, so they ran the scan again and again. But the signal stayed exactly the same. With no other explanation left, the team decided to send down a remotely operated vehicle. What its cameras captured wasn't a shipwreck. It wasn't a natural rock formation. It didn't look like anything the team had ever seen. So what did this team discover? And could it finally be the key to solving this century-old mystery? Let's dive in. The infamous triangle. Before we get to what happened in 2001, we need to understand the place where it all happened. Because once you see the numbers, the mystery starts to feel very real. The Bermuda Triangle is a huge area in the North Atlantic Ocean. It covers nearly 500,000 square miles of ocean. That's more than 1.2 million square kilometers, an area even larger than the entire country of Egypt. And what lies beneath that water is just as unsettling. The ocean floor drops fast. In fact, just north of the Bahamas is the Puerto Rico Trench, the deepest place in the entire Atlantic Ocean. It reaches a depth of about 8,400 meters, or more than 27,500 feet. If a ship or plane goes down there, finding it becomes incredibly difficult. In more than one search mission, investigators ended up losing track of both the wreck and the search itself. But the strange reputation of this place didn't begin with modern technology. People had been talking about these waters for centuries. Even Christopher Columbus wrote about unusual things during his voyage across the Atlantic in 1492. His crew reported strange compass readings, and Columbus himself recorded mysterious lights glowing on the horizon. Still, the name Bermuda Triangle didn't exist back then. It wasn't until 1964 that a magazine article gave this part of the ocean the name we still use today. And it's all because of the strange incidents that started happening in this place in the 20th century. The incidents. In March 1918, the USS Cyclops, a 542-foot U.S. Navy cargo ship, left Barbados for Baltimore. On board were more than 300 crew members and nearly 10,000 tons of manganese ore. The ship never reached its destination. It never sent a distress call. In fact, it never sent another message at all. The U.S. Navy launched a massive search across the Atlantic, but they never found the wreckage. Even stranger, in 1941, two sister ships built almost exactly the same way disappeared on nearly the same route. Then came another case that made headlines around the world. On December 5, 1945, Flight 19 took off from Fort Lauderdale for what was supposed to be a routine training exercise. It wasn't one plane. It was 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger bombers carrying 14 men. Everything seemed normal at first, but then something changed. The flight leader reported that his compass wasn't working. He said he couldn't recognize the islands below. Even the ocean looked unfamiliar. Then all of a sudden, they lost contact, and all 5 aircraft disappeared. As if that wasn't shocking enough, a rescue plane carrying 13 more men was sent out that same evening. It disappeared too. Despite years of searching, investigators have never recovered confirmed wreckage from any of those 6 aircraft. And that makes you think, what really happens in this place? Of course, Scientists have offered several possible explanations, and many of them are completely real. Powerful storms can form in minutes, leaving ships with almost no time to react. The Gulf Stream, one of the strongest ocean currents on Earth, can carry floating wreckage dozens of miles away in just a few hours, making search efforts incredibly difficult. There are also unusual compass conditions in this part of the Atlantic. In certain areas, true north and magnetic north line up almost perfectly. If navigators don't account for that, it can lead to serious navigation errors. Every one of those explanations is backed by real science. Everyone has caused accidents somewhere in the world, but none of them fully explain the cases where there was no wreckage, no debris, no distress call. And then, in 2003, a team searching for hidden treasure beneath the waters of the Bermuda Triangle stumbled upon something that would change the course of this mystery forever. The 2001 discovery. In 2000, a Canadian marine exploration company signed an agreement with the Cuban government. At the time, Cuba was struggling economically, but hidden beneath its coastal waters were hundreds of old shipwrecks, many dating back 300 to 400 years to the Spanish colonial era. Historical records suggested some of those wrecks were carrying silver coins, gold bars, and valuable cargo that could be worth millions of dollars today. The plan was simple. The company would search the seafloor, locate the wrecks, recover anything valuable, and split the profits with the Cuban government. Nobody was looking for a lost civilization. Nobody was trying to prove the Bermuda Triangle was real. This was just a commercial salvage mission. So, day after day, the research ship moved slowly across the ocean, usually at just 3 to 5 knots. And the main tool they were using was side-scan sonar. It works by sending thousands of sound pulses every minute toward the seafloor. When those sound waves bounced back, they created an image of whatever was below. Soft mud and silt absorb most of the sound, and they appear dark on the screen. Hard rock reflects more of it, making it look brighter. And after weeks of scanning, the team kept finding the usual mud and rock as they always did. Then, one day, the screen changed. At first, it was just a few straight lines. Then, more appeared. Several of them, running almost perfectly parallel. Some shapes looked rectangular, while others repeated over and over, almost like they were part of a planned layout. When the crew zoomed out, the formation stretched across hundreds of meters. That wasn't normal. Nature doesn't usually organize itself into long, repeating straight lines. So, the team immediately slowed the ship and scanned the area again. The lines were still there. They changed the ship's speed. The lines stayed. Even changing the ship's direction had no effect. Maybe their sonar was malfunctioning. So they checked the equipment, and everything was working perfectly. Then they noticed something even stranger. Behind the bright shapes were dark shadows. That detail changed everything. Flat sand can't cast a shadow. Loose mud can't either. Only a solid object with a real height can block the sound waves. Whatever they were seeing wasn't just a pattern on the ocean floor. Something was physically standing there. And to find out what it really was, the team would have to examine this object closely with their eyes. The ROV descent. The sonar had proven one thing. Something was down there, but sonar could only show shapes. It couldn't tell the team what they were actually looking at. To find out, they needed to see the sea floor with their own eyes. So, the team decided to send down an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle. Think of it as an underwater drone. It was connected to the ship by a thick reinforced cable and carried powerful lights and high-definition cameras designed to survive one of the harshest environments on Earth. The destination was more than 1,000 meters below the surface. At that depth, the pressure is over 100 times greater than at sea level, enough to crush ordinary equipment in seconds. Before launching it, the crew checked every system one last time: the cameras, the lights, and the controls. Everything had to work perfectly, because if anything failed down there, the ROV would likely be gone forever. Finally, they lowered it into the ocean. The descent was slow, and with every passing minute, the world above began to disappear. For the first 100 to 200 meters, sunlight still reached through the water. Small fish swam past the camera as if nothing unusual was happening. Everything looked normal, but that didn't last long. By around 300 meters, the sunlight had almost vanished. The colors slowly disappeared. By the time the ROV reached 500 meters, there was no natural light left at all. Complete darkness. From that point on, the only light came from the ROV itself. Its powerful lamps cut through the black water, revealing only a small patch of the ocean at a time. Tiny particles drifted past the camera like dust floating through the air. Outside, the pressure was immense. Inside the control room, the crew watched in complete silence. Then, at roughly 700 meters, something appeared. At first, it was only a faint outline at the edge of the lights. As the ROV moved closer, the image became clearer. And what the cameras showed wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of an uneven seabed covered with rocks and debris, there were large flat surfaces. The pilot carefully moved closer. The edges became sharper. These weren't loose boulders. They weren't pieces of a shipwreck. They looked like massive stone blocks, some stretching several meters across, sitting tightly against one another. Some stood by themselves. Others appeared to be lined up in long, organized rows. Then came another surprise. The surfaces looked remarkably smooth, almost clean. At a depth where decades, or even centuries, of pressure and ocean currents should have left everything worn down, these structures looked strangely well preserved. In that moment, the mission changed. The crew had set out to find old shipwrecks. Instead, they were staring at something they couldn't explain: the unusual structures. Once the ROV returned to the surface, the team did something very simple. They watched the footage again and again, this time frame by frame, because they wanted to understand exactly what they had found. The first thing they measured was the size. Many of the blocks appeared to be between 2 and 5 meters across. These weren't small rocks scattered across the seabed. They were enormous. And what made the discovery even crazier was the shape. The blocks had flat surfaces. What caught the team's attention the most wasn't their size. It was the way they were arranged. The blocks weren't scattered randomly, like the remains of a landslide or a collapsed cliff. Many seemed to sit in straight lines. Some were spaced almost evenly apart. The more they studied the images, the more it looked as though someone, or something, had placed them there. Then came another surprise. Most of the seabed around Cuba is made of limestone. It is a relatively soft rock formed from ancient sea creatures and marine sediments, and over time, it wears down. But these blocks looked much more compact. Their smooth surfaces made them look more like granite, a much harder rock that forms deep inside the Earth's crust under intense heat and pressure. And the surprise didn't end there. At a depth of around 700 meters, the seafloor is constantly covered by falling sediment. Tiny particles slowly sink through the water every day, building layer upon layer over hundreds or even thousands of years. Given enough time, almost everything becomes buried. Yet many of the structures in the footage were still fully exposed. By now, the team knew they weren't looking at an ordinary patch of seafloor, but they still had to answer two crucial questions. What exactly was this? And who could have created something like it beneath the ocean? The scientific investigation. Instead of jumping to conclusions, the team started by ruling things out. The first possibility was a shipwreck. After all, that was what they had originally come looking for. So they compared the images with records of known Spanish colonial shipwrecks in the area. They didn't match. Shipwrecks usually break apart over time. Wood rots away. Heavy objects scatter across the seafloor. They don't leave behind rows of giant stone blocks lined up over hundreds of meters. Next, the team thought it might be coral reefs. That explanation didn't fit either. Coral grows slowly in uneven shapes. It forms twisting branches and irregular clusters. It doesn't grow in long, straight, repeating lines. The hardest explanation to eliminate was nature itself. Over thousands of years, natural forces like ocean currents, pressure, mud, and erosion can create unusual rock formations on the seafloor. But creating large areas filled with sharp, geometric patterns like these, that is extremely rare. The team also compared the discovery with similar formations found in other parts of the world. One example was the famous Giant's Causeway in Ireland. There, volcanic activity created thousands of stone columns with surprisingly straight edges. At first glance, the shapes looked similar, but the rocks weren't. Those columns are made of basalt, formed when lava cooled millions of years ago. The rocks beneath the Bermuda Triangle didn't appear to match that type at all. They also looked at underwater erosion terraces found in a few places around the world. These can create long, step-like formations beneath the sea. But there's one major difference. Those terraces are carved into one continuous rock surface. What the cameras showed here looked more like separate blocks, sitting side by side. Once again, the comparison didn't fit. After ruling out everything they could, the researchers were left with only two possible explanations. The first, it was a natural rock formation created by a geological process that scientists didn't yet fully understand. The second, the structures had been built by people. That would explain the layout, the spacing, and the sharp edges. But it created an even bigger problem. When could anyone have possibly built something at the bottom of the ocean? With no clear explanation for what the structures were, the team turned to the next question. How long had they been sitting at the bottom of the ocean? The age problem. The site lies about 700 meters below today's sea level. That detail created the biggest problem of all. If these structures were natural, they would have needed thousands of years to end up at that depth. According to geologists, a drop of 700 meters in the Caribbean doesn't happen overnight. It usually occurs very slowly through tectonic movement. A process like that can take anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 years. And that's where the problem begins. If the structures really are that old, who could have built them? Around that time, people living in the region were believed to be small groups of hunter-gatherers. Most lived in bands of only 20 to 50 people. They used simple stone tools, so they couldn't create these enormous structures and arrange multi-ton stone blocks into carefully planned rows. To solve this contradiction, some members of the research team suggested another possibility. What if the land hadn't sunk slowly over thousands of years? What if it had dropped much more suddenly? Perhaps a massive earthquake or geological collapse had caused part of the coastline to sink beneath the ocean in a very short time. That idea could explain why the structures appeared surprisingly clean. At depths like this, tiny particles of sediment are constantly settling onto the sea floor. Even if only about 1 millimeter builds up each year, over thousands of years, almost everything should eventually become buried. That explanation seemed to fit what the cameras had recorded. But even this explanation had a major problem. Powerful earthquakes and sudden collapses are incredibly destructive. Nature is very good at destroying things. It is much less likely to build perfect geometry. So the researchers kept running into the same contradiction. If the structures were natural, their shape didn't match. If they were built by humans, their age didn't seem to make sense. So, where does all this leave us? The ocean's greatest mystery. Everything the team discovered pointed to one conclusion. The Bermuda Triangle still holds secrets we don't fully understand. But before they could uncover the truth, the investigation came to an end. Not because the mystery had been solved, but because continuing the research would have cost millions of dollars. The structures were lying about 700 meters below the surface. A proper scientific expedition at that depth isn't something you can do in a few days. It requires specialized research ships, advanced robotic vehicles, large teams of scientists, and months of work. The cost can easily reach millions of dollars. For a private company that had only set out to find old shipwrecks, that kind of project simply wasn't possible. So the mission came to an end. The team documented everything they had found. Then they left the site exactly where it was, still sitting on the ocean floor, still unidentified. When you step back, that's what makes this discovery so different. For more than a century, the Bermuda Triangle has been known because of things that have disappeared. Ships like the USS Cyclops, aircraft like Flight 19, the Marine Sulphur Queen, and many others that were never fully explained, despite years of searching. Those stories are about things that vanished. This one isn't. It's about something that was found. A collection of strange structures resting 700 meters beneath the ocean, arranged in a way that researchers still struggle to explain. And perhaps the biggest mystery isn't the structures themselves. It's how little we know about the world beneath us. Scientists have mapped parts of the moon in greater detail than large areas of Earth's deep ocean. Even today, much of the seafloor remains unexplored, including vast sections of the Atlantic. That leaves one final question. If one short survey could find something this mysterious, what else could still be hiding beneath the Bermuda Triangle? Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more crazy stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.